Hey guys, welcome to CraterMania. I'm your host, Crater. Sorry about the little bit of a delay on starting the stream. I had some issues. Something was going on with my mic, and the sound wasn't sounding right. So yeah, I apologize for that. Um, but anyway, you guys, if you've watched the show before, welcome back. If you're watching for the first time, welcome to CraterMania, where I'm spending this year in 2025 talking about 500 movies that I'm going to be watching. So this week I'm up to, I believe it's like 48 or something, 48 through 52 is what I'm doing this week. I may be wrong about that number. Um, it's on the title of the video. So if I'm wrong, you guys will be able to see what's actually right. But I'm doing something a little bit different now because, like, with the last stream that I did this past Sunday, um, it went over 4 hours, and I did not intend it to do that. I don't know what happened. I think I made way too many notes or something. But I'm thankful that there was some people in there like Russell and a guy named Greg who had joined me in the chat on there. They were there to the very end of that stream. So thanks to those guys for being a part of that stream and just staying with me and listening to me ramble on about a bunch of movies. Um, so yeah, like I did. I watched. I talked about a bunch of Kevin Smith movies on the last stream, and it took me like over 2 hours just to get through them and all the notes that I had put down. And a lot of people will say, "Well, you don't have to go over all those notes that you make." Well, that's true, but there was a lot of stuff that I learned while doing research on those Kevin Smith movies that I never knew before, and I just, I wanted to share those because they were super cool, interesting things about just little things that were either hidden in the film or something that happened, behind the scenes. It's just really fun, and if you guys have the time, if you guys want to go check out that stream, I would really appreciate that. That'd be super cool of you guys to do that. But again, I'm not. There's no pressure because I understand. I mean, it was an over 4 hour long stream, and I don't expect you guys to sit and watch that whole thing. But if you're wanting to learn some really cool, interesting tidbits about Kevin Smith movies, then that may be the video for you. Um, so, like as I was saying, before I got off track there, I'm doing a little something different now, where because I usually would have these on Sundays, but I'm gonna be splitting up the week that I watch these movies by covering half of them on Thursdays, which is today if you're watching this live, and then the other half on Sundays. And like I'm also continuing like with the whole theme of the movies I watch too, like from time to time, and that includes this week. So with this episode that I'm doing is it's based off, it's called Spielberg Mania. So, and it's about the greatest. This stream is dedicated to the work of one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, um, and that's Steven Spielberg. And I've talked a little bit about Spielberg in the past when I covered Gremlins and Goonies and Batteries Not Included. But all those films were just movies that he was a producer on. Um, Whereas the movies that I watched this week, he was the director of, and he had more involvement with those movies. Um, so, with that said, let's start talking about these movies that not only inspired me, but inspired millions around the world. So the first movie that I watched this week is one of Steven Spielberg's earliest films, and that's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And Close Encounters of the Third Kind is a 1977 sci-fi movie that tells the story of Roy Neary, an electrical lineman in Indiana whose life changes after an encounter with a UFO. So the movie follows Richard Dreyfuss as Roy as he's losing his damn mind and his family in the process because he's become obsessed with these UFOs. Um, after coming in contact with them, and he begins to start having these visions of like a mountain like shape that ends up being the Devil's Tower. Um, well, he finds out that other people are having similar experiences, including this woman named Jillian, who's played by Melissa Dillon. And you may know her from like A Christmas Story, where she was the mom. And she also and so Jillian has a son named Barry in the movie, and he's a real little kid. He's just about like 3 or 4 years old or something. Um, and he ends up getting abducted by the aliens. Now, here's something cool that I learned about the kid who played Barry. Uh, Apparently, uh, Stanley Kubrick was super impressed with this kid's performance in Close Encounters, and he originally wanted him to play Danny in The Shining, but the kid couldn't do it because of like scheduling conflicts or something like that. Um, so, Close Encounters of the Third Kind is a classic when it comes to sci-fi movies, and it's considered one of the best of the 1970s because it was when it came out, it was nominated for I think 8 different Academy Awards, including Best Director and Best Original Screenplay. And it also came out the same year as Star Wars, the first Star Wars movie, which is another sci-fi classic. And those two are really what helped bring back that whole sci-fi alien craze that was big in the 1950s and the 1960s. Now this was late 1970s, and by the time the 80s had rolled around, there were a ton of movies coming out that showcased aliens, including a lot of the like, which are known as classics now, like E.T. and The Thing and Aliens and Predator, and just a ton of them. And there was a ton of uh, alien craze movies coming out at that time. Even like really bad ones like Mac and Me and stuff, which was an E.T. ripoff or whatever. But anyway, I just want to talk about a few of the best scenes in the movie that I really enjoy. Um, so I really like when the power outage happens at the beginning of the movie, and Roy goes out to investigate since it's part of his job, and then that's when he comes in contact with the UFO, and I believe that's what really sets the stage for the whole movie. It's a very brief encounter, but that scene brings this whole level of mystery and curiosity, and what follows with Richard Dreyfuss's character Roy is almost like a descent into madness. Um, and to follow up on that, there's several scenes of Roy becoming like overly obsessed with these visions and taking normal things in his house like shaving cream and mashed potatoes, and he's using them to build like this mountain that he's been seeing in his head since the encounter. But out of all those particular scenes, the one that stands out to me is when he starts pulling up all this dirt from outside the house, and he's throwing it like through his window and all that. And it's going to I think it's going into like the kitchen of his house where he's throwing it through the window, and his kids are like helping him and all this, and his wife Ronnie, who's played by Terry Garr, um, she's been trying to like make Roy throughout the movie like get past this obsession, and she's been trying to shelter the kids from it and all that. But this whole thing with the dirt and the chicken wire that he's like pulling up and all that and just throwing it through the window, it just becomes the final straw for her, and she takes the kids and leaves, and we never see Roy's family again in the movie. Um, this is probably one of the most interesting and complex things about the movie. And I've noticed that fans of Close Encounters are divided on this because some fans see Roy in the wrong for his pursuit to know what's going on, and others see Ronnie in the wrong for leaving Roy. Um, I'm more on Roy's side because in the movie it's clear he loves his family, and but he's encountered this life changing thing, and his wife just kind of gives up on him. I mean, she still loves him, but the thing is, like, she can't deal with it, and sometimes that's just how it is for some people, I guess. But I'm glad that I have a wife like my wife Candace, because if something were to ever happen like this in real life, I think that both me and her would probably be like Roy, and we'd want to know what the hell is going on. Um, now, and before I talk about what is probably my favorite scene in the whole movie, I just want to give an honorable mention to a little brief scene in the movie that I always laugh at. Um, so it's from the guy who plays the snow shoveling old man in Home Alone. It's also the guy who sells Christine to Arnie and Christine. I can't think of the actor's name. I want to say it's like Tom something, but I don't know. But anyway, there's this brief scene, like in Close Encounters, where the townspeople are in this like conference room, and they're having this meeting with these government officials, who are trying to sway the town from like looking too much into the UFO stuff. And this guy sitting there just out of nowhere says, "I saw Bigfoot once. Made a sound I would not want to hear twice in my life." And, and I believe they put that in there because, there's a lot of people in real life that have claimed to see Bigfoot or aliens, and those people are sometimes portrayed as being crazy. But I just want to say I've personally witnessed some paranormal stuff in my life, so I'm really kind of open to believing in things that may seem impossible sometimes. Um, but that scene is just always funny to me because of how he delivers that line. So I wanted to just throw that in there as like an honorable mention as some of my favorite scenes from the movie. Um, but so before I move on to the next movie, I have to talk about my favorite scene of the movie, and it's probably the most intense scene of the whole movie, and that's the scene where Jillian's little boy Barry gets taken by the aliens. Um, when you first watch this movie, you're still not sure at this point in the movie what the aliens' intentions are for coming to Earth. So when they arrive at Jillian and Barry's home, they're trying to come through the doors, the fireplace, any way they can get in. And the whole time, Barry is like, "Let them in, come play," or whatever. And and everything in the house is just turning on and moving by itself, and everything is just complete chaos. I mean, that's the only way to really kind of describe this scene. And Jillian is of course like freaking out and scared of what is happening. And in the end of the scene, Barry is still trying to get to him, and he crawls out the doggy door to the outside and of the house, and that's when they take him. Now watching this now, like as I'm older and as a parent, when you think about something like your child being taken in any way possible, it's a really fucking scary thing to imagine. Um, and this scene is like not my favorite because of the scary situation that they're being put in, but because of how involved I get with the scene and how my focus is drawn to it every time I watch it, and it's super impressive that the amount of effects work that was put into that scene. And if you've seen the movie, you know it all ends well with aliens. They return Barry at the end, along with all these other people and like animals and stuff that had been missing for years. Um, but what puzzles me, and I want to hear what you guys think about this. If you're not watching live, leave a comment. uh, down below, like after you watch it, and let me know like what when Roy is chosen to leave with the aliens at the end. What happens to him? Because it's left open to interpretation to the audience. So what do you guys think in the chat or anyone that's watching this on replay? Um, Let me know what you think happened to Roy. Did he ever return to Earth? Uh, does his family come back to him? Do you think we should have gotten a sequel for this? Um, I don't know. I mean, like, I feel like it's one of those movies that's really good as is, and it's left open ended. So I always kind of enjoy that too. Um, but who knows? I'm curious what everybody else thinks. Like, what happened to Roy? Um, Maybe it was all just a ruse by the aliens just to get Roy on the mothership so they could probe the shit out of him or something. I don't know, but overall, I mean, the movie is fantastic. Um, with all jokes aside, it's fantastic. And it's one of these movies um that, if you're a sci-fi fanatic like me, it's one that you will want to watch over and over again. And as I said before, it just it's one of those classics that inspired a lot of other films, going into the 80s. Um, oh, I see my wife, Kansas. Roy went to Probeville. Yeah, I mean, he could have. Like I said, the aliens could have just been like, all right, we're going to trick these people on Earth. We're going to get this dumb ass on, on our ship. We're going to do all kinds of experiments on him. I don't know, like, but that's the beautiful thing about the movie being left to interpretation. Um, so let me get a drink real quick. Wet my whistle. So the next movie that I want to talk about is probably my favorite rendition of the Peter Pan story, and that's the 1991 movie Hook. Now, just to kind of give a little of a backstory, I was 5 years old when this movie was out, and it was the perfect time to be a kid and see a movie like this. Um, I was already an established Peter Pan fan. It was my favorite animated Disney movie at the time. Uh, I would also watch the Mary Martin musical that we had on VHS. Um, my parents had taken me to a Disney on Ice event back in 1990, and I still have the ticket stub for that somewhere. But at this event, my mom had bought me a Peter Pan hat, and I took that hat and made it as a part of a costume where I dressed as Peter Pan for Halloween later that year. Um, so the 90s really continued where the 80s left off when it came to marketing movies, especially towards kids, because there was so many movies that wasn't even targeted towards kids that would put out toys and merchandise that kids would want. It was a very like innovative time in history that continues to this day, and the reason why collecting and nostalgia is so big with people these days, I think. Um, Now I bring that up because this movie is a perfect example of that. There were Hook action figures and play sets that I had many of, and this was also during a time when McDonald's was even making Happy Meal toys for tons of movies coming out, including Hook. I had a I had a Hook lunchbox around this time. There was a video game for the Super Nintendo that I always loved to play. Um, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was coming out for, like I said, these movies. That and this movie was like a movie targeted towards kids, But like I said, there's a lot of other examples out there, and I was talking to Wes from Dead Pit not long ago, and I was telling him how like the Sylvester Stallone movie and Wesley Snipes movie, Demolition Man, that came out in the '90s. It even had like a toy line and stuff that was targeted towards kids. When that movie is not like for kids at all. So yeah, I just thought that it's as the '90s was a very interesting time. Um, so anyway, let's talk a little bit about the movie and why I love it. So Robin Williams plays Peter Banning, and he has just completely forgotten his childhood and the memory of being Peter Pan. He's become like this workaholic lawyer where he's kind of an asshole to his family, and he prioritizes his career over his family. One of the things they focus on is how um, he's missed his son Jack's big baseball game at the beginning of the movie, and even though Jack's team lost the game, you can tell it hurts him more knowing his dad wasn't there. Um, However, this movie does show the importance, the important significance of family as the overall theme. Because when Dustin Hoffman, who plays Captain Hook, kidnaps Peter's kids, Peter has to go to Neverland, and his time there is ultimately about rediscovering his love for his kids and his wife. Um, he learns that true happiness doesn't lie within success from his job, but just creating good memories with his family. Um, Peter has to confront his past in order to move forward, and he has to face his fears, which come in the form of Captain Hook in this, so he can rediscover who he was as Peter Pan, and ultimately become a better father. Um, so the main setting of the movie, Neverland, suggests that imagination is essential in life when it comes to like creativity and happiness. And that's a recurring theme in many of Spielberg's movies, and it's an important element of my own life. And I think that's what ultimately draws me to Spielberg's work and why he's one of my all-time favorite filmmakers. Um, so all these undertones give Hook a depth that really goes beyond its surface as just a kids movie. The movie, like I said, shows the importance of family and that growing up doesn't mean you have to lose your sense of imagination and losing that inner child part of you. You know, it's just I think that's why I love this movie so much, and I see it as one of my favorite Steven Spielberg movies. But the movie also stars Julia Roberts as Tinkerbell and Bob Hoskins as Smee, Maggie Smith as Granny Wendy, and Peter's kids, Jack and Maggie, played by Charlie Corsmo and Amber Scott. Now, Charlie Corsmo was also in Dick Tracy, which came out the year before this movie. And he was in another movie that I'll be covering on this Sunday's stream. What About Bob? With Bill Murray and Richard Dreyfuss. Now, and that also came out in 1991 as well. And there's another movie that he is in that is it's one of my favorite movies from the '90s, and that's the teen comedy Can't Hardly Wait from 1998. And I'm eventually going to cover that movie as well here on the channel. Because, like I said, I absolutely love that movie. If you know what it is, props to you. Um, but Amber Scott, who played Maggie in the movie, didn't really do anything else after Hook, which is surprising because for a kid actor, I thought she did pretty good. And she even has a scene in the movie where she sings this song, and she has a really good singing voice. So I don't know what the deal was on her. Maybe acting just wasn't for her, or maybe her parents didn't want to pursue it. I don't know. Um, And there's some really cool cameos in this movie too, from Glenn Close to and David Crosby. They both play pirates in the movie, in part of Captain Hook's crew. Um, Phil Collins shows up for like a couple minutes when the kids get kidnapped. He shows up at the house as this investigator to find out what's going on. Um, and then when Peter is being taken to Neverland by Tinkerbell, fairy dust like falls from her and onto this couple. It's on a bridge in London, and it causes them to fly up and dancing in circles. And that couple is played by George Lucas and Carrie Fisher. But also late in the movie, there's a cameo which I don't know that I've ever kind of noticed it before. When I watched this week, I realized who she was. So there's a cameo from a very young Gwyneth Paltrow where she plays a young Wendy in Peter's memories. Um, and I thought that was really cool because, like, I'm not a big Gwyneth Paltrow fan, but I do like her as Pepper Potts in the Marvel movies. And just when I seen her, when I was watching this week, I was like, that's Gwyneth Paltrow. I've never really realized that. But I wanted to mention the kids too, the kids that played the Lost Boys in this. So the kids playing the Lost Boys didn't really go on to do anything else that was really well known. At least nothing that I know of, except for there's that one kid. He's kind of got like freckles, red hair. He was the annoying little kid in the movie Freaked, who had like real big ears and he wore glasses and he was like obsessed fan of Alex Winter's character Ricky. But other than that, all that I do know is that several of the kids that played the Lost Boys in Hook, they did continue to work, but I can't really tell you anything off the top of my head right now what they did beyond Hook. Um, but that leads me to talk a little bit about some of my most memorable scenes that I enjoyed from the movie. And I only mentioned some of the ones I like best because I really do love everything about this movie. But since I just mentioned the Lost Boys, I feel like I should mention the character of Rufio, who was the leader of the Lost Boys, and how he was just a super cool character to a lot of kids growing up, and ultimately becomes a very iconic part of this movie. Um, so his death in the end is very tragic and heartbreaking, especially right before he passes um, after being stabbed by Hook. His final words to Peter is, "I wish I had a dad like you." And that when I was a kid, that scene absolutely tore me apart. And it really got in my feels, as they would say. Um, and to this day, it still gets me pretty emotional. I won't lie. I mean, like I said, that was a very important movie to me growing up. And like I said, I was only 5 years old when it came out. So, um, another scene that really stands out to me comes in the middle of the movie when the Lost Boys are trying to help Peter become his old self again. And after he's like worn out all day from this training, he sits down with the Lost Boys for a big dinner. Now, much to Peter's surprise, there is no food that he's able to see, and all the Lost Boys are eating like this invisible food to him. But what it comes down to is, they're using their imagination. They're using this to think that this food is real. Um, and this scene is a pivotal point for Peter's character as he develops his sense of imagination once again when he finally joins in, plays along with them. And when he finally starts using his imagination, the food that is shown on the dinner table is some of the most delicious looking food that I've ever seen in a movie. Um, so that's Hook. Like I said, I love this movie. It's one of my very favorite Steven Spielberg movies. What do you guys think about this movie? What are your memories of it? Just let me know. So moving on, uh, the next movie that I watched this week was the original Jurassic Park that came out in 1993, and it's one of like the top three most successful movies that Steven Spielberg has ever done. And it's one of my absolute personal favorites from him as well. This movie really helped develop my interest in dinosaurs. Well, I already knew of dinosaurs from other stuff like the Flintstones and from like books and stuff like that. That my mom and dad would show me. Um, Jurassic Park was really like the main thing that made me want to know more about them. And much like the marketing towards kids I spoke about from Hook, the landscape was just even wider with Jurassic Park because even in the movie, merchandising is featured in a gift shop, and all of the merch in the movie was more than likely able to be purchased in real life. Um, because the movie had toys and games and books and school supplies, pajamas, pretty much anything imaginable that was a product directed towards kids. It was truly just a magical time to be a kid in the 90s. So anyway, the movie centers around a wealthy entrepreneur, which is John Hammond, who has secretly created this theme park on a remote island populated with genetically engineered dinosaurs. And he invites a group of scientists and his grandchildren to experience this. Um, However, things quickly go wrong when Dennis Nedry, played by Wayne Knight, um, he's this disgruntled employee at Jurassic Park, and so he sabotages the park's security systems, and allowing the dinosaurs to escape and their enclosures and just to terrorize the people that's there at the park. So this movie is widely seen as a sci-fi adventure movie, but for a long time now, I've seen it as also a horror movie, especially when the second half of the movie begins, with the T Rex escaping and terrorizing the humans. But I think the most terrifying thing that came from this movie happens in the final half hour of the movie when they're being hunted by the Velociraptors, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. Um, and one of the biggest themes of the movie is how humans can be mesmerized by greed and power. And a lot of that is like the root of all evil. And it gets to the point where it controls their lives. And ironically, all of that backfires on John Hammond as he tried to play God, basically, and bring the dinosaurs back. But ultimately, he has no control over them when issues with the park arise. Um, and it just goes to show that nature is not something to be messed with. Um, Jurassic Park is an absolute thrill ride of a movie that just continues to resonate with all audiences today. It serves as something to garner interest in dinosaurs for young kids. Um, the movie brought back that interest in the 90s, and even when kids of today see the movie for the first time, it helps them gain interest in dinosaurs. Um, when it came out, I I was so excited to see it, and my family took me to see it at the movie theater, and I got to see every Jurassic Park movie in theaters except the last one, Dominion. My son Noah, even his first movie he saw in the theater was the first Jurassic World, and I'll remember that forever as something we shared because um, I don't. And I know that Jurassic Park was not my first movie that I saw in theaters, um, but it was definitely I want to say one of the first ones, one of the first movies that I saw in theaters. So to just kind of share that with my son is really cool to me. Um, and when I was a kid, my favorite characters in movies was usually a kid character. Uh, if a kid was in the movie, uh, and with Jurassic Park, I really liked the little boy Tim because as a little boy myself at that time, I was always looking to relate to a character like that. Um, but as I get older, my feelings change on things about movies, and its characters. And oh, hey Tom, thanks for being here tonight, man. I mentioned you last week, on the last stream this past Sunday, because on the stream before that, you had given me the idea to watch Batteries Not Included, and so that was the first movie I watched on the last week's stream. I don't know if you'd watched it yet, Tom, but thanks for reminding me of that movie. That's so you can go in there and I give you a shout out on that last stream when I talk about it too. So yeah, thanks for that, man. Thanks for being here tonight. Um, but as I was saying though, like as I get older, my feelings change on stuff about movies and the characters that's in them and stuff. Um, and now when I watch Jurassic Park, I really like the character of Tim's sister Lex, um, because she plays a pretty big part in the movie in the end, and she's basically saves all the other human characters when she shows the power of being a nerd and hacks into the security system, is able to get the power turned back on. um and I can't think of that actress's name, but she's in another movie that I really love, another one of my favorite movies from the 90s called Angus. um, and it's kind of a coming of age type story, and that's another one that I'll probably cover sometime later this year. Um, but I just want to mention that real quick that but when it comes to memorable scenes for me in Jurassic Park, the movie is packed with iconic scenes. Um, and I think the Brachiosaurus reveal is a big one when Alan, Ellie, and Ian Malcolm arrive on the property with John Hammond, and the reaction from Alan in this scene feels so genuine as to what a human would do if they were to see a real life dinosaur for the first time. Um, I think that makes Sam Neill. Sam Neill's an amazing actor. I love him and a ton of stuff, especially in the Mouth of Madness by John Carpenter. That movie's fucking awesome. Um, Tom, you said your first movie experience at a theater was Temple of Doom. Well, I actually talk about I'm talking about Temple of Doom tonight. That's my favorite Indiana Jones movie, so that's super cool. And you said you can't beat Jaws. Well, that's very true. Like that is definitely probably the most iconic of Spielberg's movies. And I plan to cover it in a special theme that I'm doing later this year. So don't worry, I'll get around to Jaws. Um, but like as I was saying, that scene is just with the Brachiosaurus, them seeing that's the first dinosaur you see in the movie. It's iconic because it's shown just like walking in this like prehistoric kind of backdrop, and it just really captures the moment of of the movie, and that just like that scene has become iconic now. But like I said, a ton of scenes from this movie are considered iconic. Another one is the T Rex attack on the car. with the kids is and that's so iconic. I mean, it's I think it was the scenes that's like even featured in maybe the trailer. I think, and it's an intense scene because and this is when I really feel the movie becomes like a horror movie. And what the T Rex does in this shows absolute power and just ferocity that leaves the humans feeling helpless. Um, Now, and as a kid, when I was watching that, it was absolutely terrifying for me, and like I was just like having an anxiety attack, just thinking, oh God, these kids are going to get killed. And to further that whole like horror element, the raptor kitchen chase scene, it's absolutely intense and probably the most terrifying thing to me in the movie. Um, so like you see how smart these raptors are, and that's they showcase that in the movie as they're hunting the kids' Tim and legs, and it just creates this whole atmosphere that's suspenseful, and I mean, and even though it's like suspenseful and terrifying, it's very memorable. I mean, that's another one of the most memorable moments from the movie. Um, and just watching it again this week, it's I mean, it's that scene is still super scary. And it was the effects in this were really groundbreaking for like CGI and practical effects like mixed together, which inspired a lot of other films after this to start doing that as well. So and especially with the that scene in particular, like they're so the effects are so well done, even with the CGI stuff, and it's really hard, to get CGI stuff right in movies when it comes to effects. But in the ending of this movie, where the T Rex saves the day by battling the Velociraptors, it's just an absolute unexpected twist, and it's quite possibly one of the most iconic moments from the whole movie. And I know I've said that about like all these other, but it really is, and that really makes it's like probably one of the best movies of all time. Um, and these are like I said, these are just a few of the many iconic moments that make Jurassic Park a timeless classic. Um, do you guys have a favorite scene from the movie? Um, I'd love to hear about it. If you're watching, like I said, if you're watching this on replay, just drop a comment below. Tell me your favorite scene or character. I'd love to talk with you about it in the comments. I try to reply to all the comments people leave me on the videos. I just really appreciate you guys just checking this stuff out. Um, but yeah, just drop a comment below if you're watching this on replay. Tell me your favorite scene or character or whatever kind of memories that you have about Jurassic Park. I'd appreciate it. So the next three and final movies that I'll be talking about this evening is one of the greatest movie trilogies to ever come out of the 80s. Um, the Indiana Jones 80s movie trilogy is phenomenal. It's like I said, it's one of the greatest movie trilogies that ever come out of the 80s. Um, and that's also kind of rare too, where like a trilogy of movies all exist within one decade. There's a few here and there, but I just feel like it's very rare nowadays. Um, but and while the franchise is no longer just a trilogy, since two more movies have been released since The Last Crusade was released in 1989, I've decided just to only watch these for right now, and just focus on these first three, as these are the ones I really grew up on as a kid. Um, Indiana Jones is without a doubt the greatest world adventurer in movie history. Um, Indy travels the world looking for all these ancient artifacts, most of which actually exist in the real world, because and he's enlisted by the U.S. government uh, to go and search for these artifacts so he can deliver them back to them so they can be placed in like history museums. Um, and Indy is also an archaeology professor at this university where like all his female students seem to be in love with him. I always remember the scene of in I believe it's Raiders of the Lost Ark when he's teaching the class and like so all these girls are like gawking at him and stuff and there's the one girl she like bats her eyes and she's got love you written on her eyelids um and it's just and that's a reoccurring theme in the Indiana Jones movies. He's like this chick magnet, and he's always getting all these different women. Um, and I honestly can't see anyone but Harrison Ford playing this role, even though there's been young Indiana Jones actors in like flashback sequences and the TV series. Um, but for the main role for the movies, no one beats Harrison Ford. I feel like he was chosen for this perfectly. After already being known as Han Solo in the Star Wars movies, and ironically, Han Solo and Indiana Jones are the two biggest characters that Harrison Ford has ever played. And even though he's playing Red Hulk in the new Captain America movie, there's just no way the popularity of that character will surpass Han Solo or Indiana Jones. Um, Tom, that's true. I'm glad you chimed in on that. Tom Selleck almost got the part for this. That's true. Um, and he went on to do Magnum PI, like you said, and I Tom Selleck. I don't think I have any Tom Selleck movies uh, this year, at least planned so far. But I was never a huge fan of him, um, but I did like Magnum PI. I think that was an exception. Um, I love a lot of '80s TV series in general, man. Like just yeah, and that's what like Magnum PI, Miami Vice, A-Team. I mean, like a ton of stuff. I could go on and on about that. That's another stream for another time, possibly. Um, you say Tom Selleck doesn't. Well, he doesn't. He doesn't really. You're right about that. He doesn't have much range. I remember this one movie. I think it was Tom Selleck that my dad liked. Quigley Down Under, I believe it is it's kind of like a western or something. I think. I don't think I ever watched it, but I always remember my dad talking about it. Because he's a western guy, and I like some westerns, but not a lot. I think some of the extent of my interest in westerns is probably like uh, the Clint Eastwood movies, and you can in a way kind of see some of the scenes in the Indiana Jones movies are like western inspired, especially like the scenes where he's riding the horses and all that. Um, but but anyway, getting back to Indiana Jones, um, I've always thought it was so cool that in these movies, Indiana Jones could turn up in any part of the world. And as a kid, these movies kind of got me interested in world history and introduced me to several different countries and their cultures and all that. But unfortunately, they also introduced me to one of, if not the most evil group in world history, the Nazis. Um, so in the first movie from 1981, which is Raiders of the Lost Ark, the movie takes place in 1936, I believe, where we see Indy race against the Nazis to find the Ark of the Covenant, which is this powerful, like biblical artifact. So there's a ton to cover with these movies. Let me just stop and say that for a second. There's so much to cover with these movies, but I'm only going to cover like some of my favorite scenes and a couple other little things. I can. That way, I can possibly revisit these movies later down the road. Um, so, what better way to start talking about these movies than the opening scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark? This is without a doubt the most iconic Indiana Jones scene there is. And it's a damn fine, sure way to get you invested in these movies by placing it at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark. So in this scene, and if there's I'm probably too late to the game to be telling saying spoiler alert, but in case for some reason you're just starting to watch this part of the stream, um, spoiler alert. But so in this scene, it takes place in an ancient Peruvian temple that's filled with booby traps, and that's protecting this like golden idol that Indy's trying to obtain. Um, and in this scene, it also features Alfred Molina's film debut as Indy's guide to the temple, who ends up trying to portray Indy and steal the idol for himself. And if you're not familiar with that name, Alfred Molina, if you've ever seen the Sam Raimi directed Spider-Man 2, he's the guy that plays Dr. Octopus in the movie. And he's also in like Boogie Nights and some other stuff too. I just watched Boogie Nights not that long ago, towards the end of last year, and the movie is a lot better than what I remember it being. It's a good one. If you've never seen Boogie Nights, check it out. So anyway, after taking the idol from that podium, it triggers a mechanism for this trap where this massive rolling boulder comes down and is chasing after Indy, uh, threatening to crush him, only for him to escape with his life and the idol. But he he holds on. He don't hold on to it that long, because once he comes out of that temple, it's then taken by the awaiting Balak, which is played by Paul Freeman. Um, and this is what really sets the stage for the rest of the movie, as these movies are all about Indy on the chase. Um, Tom, you said 3 Indiana Jones movies had not. That's true. Yeah, it is. I've still not seen Dial of. I think it's called Dial of Destiny. That's the one I've still not watched. I need to get to that. So you said no, four had Nazis, but I don't like the last Indiana Jones one. Oh, okay. It's in that one too. Like I said, I've not seen Dial of Destiny. And I know that here recently, I don't know if it's out yet or not, but I know there was supposed to be a new Indiana Jones video game coming out too. Um, I seen a trailer for it, and I think it's like first person based, and it looks really good though. I want to maybe check that out when I once that comes out for the PlayStation, because I think it's being released for the Xbox first, if I'm not mistaken, and then it's supposed to come out, I think, in like maybe March, I think, for the PlayStation. So yeah, and I'm a PlayStation guy, so I'll definitely want to check that out. Um, but like I was saying about the whole the boulder chase scene with Indiana Jones, this scene is so iconic that it's recreated in the Indiana Jones stunt show attraction that's at Disney World. And it's featured in like dozens of different movie highlight reels as like some of the best scenes of the 80s, or best scenes in movie history, stuff like that. And I said, when I think of Indiana Jones scenes in a movie, that's the number one that you always think of. At least I do. If it's not yours, what's your guys' favorite, or your most iconic scene when it comes to Indiana Jones? Um, and aside from the opening scene, the ending may be just as well known, um, to a lot of people. And because in the ending, when Indy and Marion, played by Karen Allen, are captured by the Nazis and are forced to witness Belloc and the Nazis open the Ark of the Covenant in this like ceremony. And when they open the Ark, initially it appears to just contain only sand. However, this bunch of strange shit starts going on, and there's like equipment malfunctions, and there's this like shadowy figure that briefly appears. But like I guess these are like souls. They're like souls erupting from the ark, and the Nazi soldiers and everybody are struck by like this some kind of supernatural energy, where their faces are start melting away or their bodies are just contorting violently. Um, but that scene really freaked me out as a kid. I'm not gonna lie. It really freaked me out, especially when the Nazis' faces were just melting off. Um, and that it could the Indiana Jones some of the scenes within the Indiana Jones movies can definitely be seen as like a gateway to horror, based off like the gore and stuff in that scene, particularly with the Nazis' faces melting off. Um, but in the end, Indy and Marion they survive, and the U.S. government takes custody of the Ark and stores it in this highly like secure warehouse with all this other shit. Um, and it's an absolutely incredible movie. Um, but as far as my favorite Indiana Jones movie, that's up next with the second Indiana Jones movie from 1984, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Um, Tom, you said the last movie was a lost opportunity. Um, I've heard that from several people. Um, but I don't know. Sometimes my opinions are a little bit different from people. Sometimes they're the same. I guess once I check it out, I'll let everybody know. I'll come on here and talk about it or something. Oh, hey Russell, what's going on, man? I was just talking about you earlier, brother. When like last Sunday when I was doing the stream, and I was up till like 2:15 in the morning still doing the stream, and you were there with me for the ride. I appreciate you, man. You don't know how much that means to me. But tonight, Russell, we're talking about Steven Spielberg movies, some of my favorite ones that he's directed and stuff. And right now, like I said, I'm talking about the Indiana Jones movies, and I'm getting ready to talk about Temple of Doom, which, like I said, it is my favorite Indiana Jones movie. Um, and in this movie, it's a prequel to the events in Raiders. Um, and this one takes place a year prior to Raiders, and it features the kid who plays Data in the Goonies as Indy's sidekick, Short Round. And I think this is that kid's first movie, because this came out in 1984, and he did the Goonies a year later, which was produced by Steven Spielberg. So, and that I always forget his name, the actor's name, but he won an Academy Award not long ago, and he was extremely thankful for it, extremely humble. He thanked Steven Spielberg for like just helping him achieve all this success. It's really cool. If you guys have never seen that speech from him, check it out on YouTube. It's really like it's a really good. It's one of the best speeches I've heard at an award show. Um, but like I said, he played Short Round in Temple of Doom, and he's probably one of the main reasons why this one is my favorite of the series. Um, And there's a lot more comical situations in Temple of Doom as well than there is in Raiders, and I think that also plays a big part in entertaining me and making this one my favorite. Um, so in the movie, they're traveling to India, um, and so in the beginning, I think they're like I think they're in China, maybe. I'm not sure. But they escape there after the whole opening scene, and so um, and then they end up in India, and Indiana Jones is trying to find this like stolen sacred stone, and the stones in this movie. When I was a kid, I shit you not, I thought that these stones looked like a baked potato. Um, and they still do to me to an extent. Like when I watched the movie this day, I was like, that's a fucking baked potato. But anyway, they soon find themselves like in the clutches of this cult called the Thuggy, um, who worship the goddess Kali, and they're like in this underground like temple that's below the palace of Pankot. Um, so Indy, like, he faces like numerous dangers throughout this, including like deadly traps as always, and poisonous snakes. Indiana Jones hates snakes, and Mola Ram, who is the cult in the movies like high priest, and the main villain of the movie. Um, and that dude scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. Um, and just a lot of the stuff in this, because Temple Doom is known for its darker tone compared to the first movie, and I always feel like this was another like I said, there's scenes in Indiana Jones that feel like gateways to horror for me, and especially in this one, with the cult stuff and the scene with Mola Ram where he's ripping out the guy's heart and he's holding it as it bursts into flames when the guy's body goes down like in the bottom of that pit and it gets set on fire. Um, but out of everything in this movie, my favorite scene in this has got to be the minecart chase scene, um, which it almost feels like you're on a roller coaster in this scene. And there's like all kinds of like obstacles and they have to avoid while being chased by these cult members. Um, oh, Tom, you said you seen Goonies at the theater. That's so cool, man. Like, um, even if I could see it today in a theater, I would love that. I mean, I would have been awesome if I was alive back when it came out and old enough to have seen it. But Goonies came out in '85, and I wasn't born yet. So, but it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Um, Russell, you said in Crystal Skull film, the head priest actor was in the Britcom Mind Your Language and head prosecutor in Midnight Express. Oh, that's interesting. Um, but yeah, like back to what I was talking about with the minecart chase scene. It's incredible, and it's a super fun scene. It's probably one of my fondest childhood like movie memories. Um, because when I first saw Temple of Doom, I was very young. I was probably around like 4 or 5, around the same age when I saw Hook and some other stuff that was coming out that was already out, by Steven Spielberg. And E.T. was probably another one of my earliest Steven Spielberg movies I saw. Jaws, um, but yeah, like that scene along the minecart scene is like one of my fondest childhood movie memories. And I also feel it was a direct influence on the minecart level in the Super Nintendo game Donkey Kong Country, which is one of my favorite Super Nintendo games when I was a kid. Um, but in the end, Indiana Jones, Short Round, and Indy's love interest in this, Willie, they escape the cult after Ram is defeated on the infamous rope bridge scene, and he falls to his death and gets fed to the gators down below. Um, and oh yeah, and all the child slaves that the cult had working for them down in that temple are freed, and they get to return to their village, and that's where Indy leaves the sacred stone or the baked potato, if you will. But yeah, like I said, Temple of Doom remains as my favorite Indiana Jones movie. Um, and I think a lot of that has to do with memories I created with it in my childhood. Um, so anyway, to conclude this adventure of the Indiana Jones 80s trilogy, here when we talk about the final movie in that 80s trilogy, which is from 1989, and that's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Um, so in this movie, Indy embarks on a quest to find the Holy Grail with his father, Dr. Henry Jones Sr., which is played by Sean Connery. Even though I enjoy all of the Indies, the Indy 80s trilogy, this one is probably my least favorite of the three. Like my ranking for the 80s trilogy goes Temple of Doom was number one, Raiders of the Lost Ark number two, and Last Crusade is number three. Now I'm not saying that I don't like Last Crusade because I do, but it's the one that I'm interested in the least out of those first three movies. Um, and I think it mainly may be because of Sean Connery. Um, since I'm not a big fan of Sean Connery, so I may be brief on this one as I didn't make like a ton of notes on this one. But this is the first time we ever see a young Indiana Jones with the opening of this movie, which I think the opening takes place in like 1912, and the rest of the movie takes place in 1938, which is 2 years after the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark. But in the opening, where we see the young Indiana Jones, he's played by River Phoenix, and so he's like following this gang led by a guy named Garth, who's obviously where Indiana Jones got his fashion sense from because he's wearing like the exact same outfit and everything that Indiana Jones wears, and that's where he gets his hat from too. So he had the Garth guy had the hat, and that's where Indiana Jones got that from. But like I said, majority of this movie takes place in 1938, 2 years after the Raiders events, and he's up against the Nazis once again in this. And this one I think has a really good message um, in the search for like meaning and purpose, and the nature of faith and everything with the search for the Holy Grail. And then in the end, Indy has to race against time to help save his father's life. So, there's a lot of like importance of family and having relationships with your family members and stuff, in this. Because, there's a times in the movie where him and his dad are kind of at odds and they almost kind of seem competitive with one another. But ultimately, in the end, they show the importance of helping out your family, and especially not really just your family, but anybody that's in like dire need of being their lives being saved. I mean, that should always be like priority for you. If you're there, if you're able to help. Um, and like I said, although I'm not a fan of Sean Connery, I think that the best scenes from this actually involve him and Harrison Ford together, where whether they're either being chased by the Nazis, including like the plane chase and the tank chase. I think all that stuff is really super cool when it comes to this movie. Um, but these scenes are just iconic with this movie, and ultimately, in my opinion, makes it like a perfect ending to that indie '80s trilogy. Um, and because all of the Indiana Jones movies are known for like their thrilling action sequences and um, iconic characters and just blend of like adventure and humor and mythology. And I think like I said, the action sequences that was one of the big things. Like when I was a kid watching these, because when you're a kid, you're a really young kid, you're watching movies. Uh, that your parents or siblings or whatever, maybe you just caught it yourself. Um, but sometimes when you're so young, you don't really know exactly is all is going on, but so you just kind of remember things that were really cool about the movie, whether it be action scenes or just something that kind of really sparked your interest. But you may not know the full like story behind the movie. But I think that's the awesome thing about getting older, and you can watch these movies over and over, because it seems like almost every movie that I watch, after when I watch it multiple times, I I'm always learning something new or noticing something I didn't notice before about that movie. Um, so when it comes to the Indiana Jones movies, like I said, Temple of Doom is my favorite, but uh, what is your favorite? And it doesn't have to be between these three. It can be any of the Indiana Jones movies. Which one is your favorite? What kind of memories do you have on those? Um, but before I go tonight, I just want to go ahead and thank everybody that's been in the chat tonight and been talking along with me. I also want to thank anybody that is watching this on the replay. If you're new to the channel, if you're just discovering this channel with this video, be sure to give me a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate that. And just drop a few comments below too, talking about the movie, and I'll be sure to try to get back to you guys too on all your comments. Um, but I want to go ahead and just focus on the chat tonight while I'm doing this live. Russell, I want to thank you for being here again. I want to thank Candace for showing up earlier in the chat. Tom, I want to thank you for being here again, man. Um, Russell, you said Steven Spielberg directed the first episode of Columbo with Peter Falk. I didn't know that. That's super cool. Um, he had this show, and I talked about that a little bit on the last stream. Was Amazing Stories, and uh, Batteries Not Included was originally supposed to be an episode of Amazing Stories, and it's like it's an anthology show, a lot like Tales from the Crypt or Tales from the Dark Side or Twilight Zone or stuff like that. And I've always been big on that kind of stuff. I love anthology series. But uh, but yeah, Amazing Stories was a great show, and so was Columbo, man. Like on the last stream I did, I talked about Princess Bride, where Peter Falk plays the grandfather in that, telling the story. And Columbo was probably the most iconic thing that Peter Falk did. It's a great show. Both me and my wife love the show. My father-in-law, Carl, he loved Columbo. I think he had like all the seasons of it on DVD. Um, yeah. Tom, you said that's the first time I've heard not a fan of Sean Connery. Well, yeah, I'm just not like when it comes to like I'm a big fan of the James Bond movies, and he's not one of my favorites. When it play Roger Moore was probably my favorite. I also really liked Pierce Brosnan as James Bond, but Sean Connery just I don't know. I mean, he's cool in the Highlander. I mean, that kind of fits him for that setting and everything with Highlander. But if I had to pick a favorite Sean Connery movie, it would be the Highlander. Um, and Tom, you said you're not a fan of DiCaprio's acting. In some things, I'm not a fan, but I do like him in several. I mean, especially I got to mention he was just a kid at the time, and he was kind of an unknown actor. But when he was in What's Eating Gilbert Grape, he did a phenomenal job in that. To where um, when they had I can't remember what award show it was that he appeared at, but when he appeared at the award show, there a lot of the people in attendance were just shocked that he was just a normal kid, because he did so well in What's Eating Gilbert Grape. They really thought he was mentally handicapped. So yeah, DiCaprio I think, can be good in some stuff, but there's some stuff that I'm kind of questionable that I'm not really a fan of, like that whole Romeo and Juliet remake they did in the '90s. I'm not a fan of that. Um, but guys, once again, just want to thank you all for being here tonight in the chat, watching the stream, or again to those people if you're watching on the replay. Um, thank you guys. Appreciate the support. Love you guys and have a good night.